So I guess jumping into the questions, according to the 7th edition of the Hotelier PULSE Report, going into October, we've seen the monthly occupancy expectation decrease by about 5%, from around 34% to just over 29%. So based on our own sort of reservation data, what are the potential reasons behind that? Do you predict any changes on the horizon in regards to the booking pace and behaviors and all of that? What are your thoughts?
So if we can talk a little bit first about how this epidemic or pandemic evolved, is that what we saw was a very steep decline in reservations in March, which led to a lot of closures. We've seen over the course of the Pulse report that more and more hotels are opening, actually through July. And as they were getting ready to open, there was sort of a sense of optimism that installed itself. When hotels opened, they realized that actually the occupancy levels were not quite what they were expecting because of the lack of international travelers. And therefore, we've seen that there's been an increasing pessimism installed by the hotels in terms of their occupancy levels for the following months. Also, we have to realize that a lot of our hotels are in the Northern Hemisphere, which means that, you know, the high season is now over. And therefore, it's natural that occupancy expectations decline over the winter months. So I think it's not unexpected that you'd see a decline in occupancy levels for October. So it's really, I would say that it's natural, and it's driven by two things: seasonality, which happens every year, but also through this notion that actually the pandemic has had a larger effect on occupancy, and therefore the expectations are a little bit lower. I'd like to add one thing to that, which is we've realized in the last few months, actually, I would say since August, that about 50% of all the bookings for the month of stay are within the month, and 25% are in the previous month. So the booking pace has shortened dramatically. And therefore, also hoteliers are getting less visibility into how the month is going to look like, and that may also drive a little bit this lowered expectation for October.
Okay, and sort of going into the more sort of long-term picture in regards to the financial recovery, we've seen quite a big evolution, I guess, of sentiment in this regard. So back in April, when the report started, it was about like 40%, thought that we were going to recover that they were going to recover only in 2021. In June, we saw that increase dramatically to over 70%, and now for this month, it's back down to what it was in April. I don't know what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think there's this sort of evolution in the sentiment? Is it quite a realistic picture? Could there be any changes in the segments of properties? Because as you can see, and according to our results, like resorts, actually the majority of our respondents in the resort segment are expecting to recover in 2021. So if you could talk a little bit about that, interested to
hear. Sure. So there's a couple of trends that we see in the report, which also we validate them with some hotels, which is on the resort segment specifically, most resorts had a reasonable summer, and therefore, because they are highly driven by domestic travel, and we've seen an increase in domestic travel of about 140% versus last year. So that really made up a little bit of what was lost in terms of international travel, and therefore resorts were better positioned this summer, and therefore they expect that next summer is going to be okay. And I think the sentiment there is sort of optimistic, I would say. I think on city center hotels, what we've seen is that they did not have a good summer. And now the winter is coming. And I think a lot of hoteliers thought that maybe this was a big decline in March, and then April, May, and half of June were sort of very low. But then in the beginning of June, we started seeing a large increase in bookings. But that increase did stop at about 40 to 50% of last year. And therefore now people are saying, okay, it doesn't look like it's going to keep going up and up. Therefore, I'm going to have at least 3 months, potentially 4 months of not very good results in 2021. And then when you do the math, if you have 4 bad months, overall 2021 is going to be better than 2020, but not quite as good as 2019. And that's why I think as the crisis evolves and people are looking at the numbers and looking more forward, they now realize that 2021 is probably not as good as they hoped back in March and April. So I think that that's really what's happening. And there's these two dynamics. One is the resorts had a reasonable summer, therefore they're more optimistic versus the next summer. The city center hotels did not have a good summer. They're now realizing that booking levels are significantly lower than they were in 2019. And if they continue at this pace through, say, March or April of next year, obviously March and April of next year are expected to be better than March and April this year, but still it's not going to make up enough to have a good 2021 in the sense of good being equal to 2019.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense also with the conferences and all of like conference season also kind of out the window.
Yeah, and I think you're raising an excellent point, because we also have data in terms of group bookings, and the group bookings have not picked up at all since March of this year. And I think that makes a lot of sense what you're saying in terms of the larger hotels that rely a lot now, say in the low season, on conferences and groups and incentives, that all of those things are probably not going to happen until Easter next year. And therefore, that's also going to have an impact on their occupancy levels and therefore on their financial performance.
Right.
I think the good news there only that I would say from the reservations data is that the pricing, the ADR has been holding. It has declined a little bit, but nothing major, which means that hotels are being smart, because if there's no demand, better prices really are not going to create demand. And therefore, I think that's sort of the silver lining that we see from the data in our reservations, is that ADR is holding fairly stable versus 2019, and that's a good indication that the future may be better than people are thinking about right now.
It's actually interesting you mentioned that, because in the last report, when we asked that question, we actually saw the biggest number of hoteliers thinking that it would decrease.
Okay.
So that's kind of a.
So maybe they're now thinking about potentially changing pricing. I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see. This is really month by month. We have to take a look at the data and sort of try to anticipate the future.
Yeah, I agree. And then interestingly, in this edition, because up until the 6th edition that was published in September, the health and safety, like implementing a health and safety program, was like the top priority. In the 6th edition, it was moved down to 2nd place to make way for creating new offers and packages to tackle new markets. Now it's down to 3rd place, with the 2nd spot being held by like redesigning the sales and marketing strategies. So in your view, why would this be the case? And is there anything hoteliers should be thinking about leading up to the winter months in this regard?
So I think that's also sort of an expected behavior, because what we see in our portfolio of hotels is that most, if not all of them, have already adopted new health and safety measures. They have done local certifications. They have put a lot of methodologies in place to make sure that people feel safe in the hotels. And therefore, that has dropped in priority. What we've seen over the last couple of months is a lot of people rethinking their rate strategy, rethinking how they're going to position their products, especially because flexibility is critical nowadays. and a lot of city center hotels relied a lot on non-refundable rates to really push product out. And a lot of people are now rethinking those sort of strategies, that maybe I need a flexible rate, not a fully flexible, but maybe 15 days, or it's fully flexible, but I don't give you the money back, you have to rebook. So we're seeing a lot of those sort of more detailed actions in place. And what we're also seeing is that many hotels are rethinking their distribution strategies. Obviously, Booking.com and Expedia are still very important channels, but they are thinking about, how can I get more in touch with my guests? How can I create the confidence for them to book directly on my website? And I think that that's going to be a trend that's going to continue in 2021 and 2022. It could truly be a sort of a paradigm shift where people understand that they would be better prepared if they have a direct connection with a guest, instead of just relying on Booking.com and Expedia and other distribution channels to really push their product out to the consumers.
Yeah, that's what Jorgen was saying actually in the last interview that we did, that like this increased focus on, I guess, the direct channel and being in touch with the guest journey. And so it's not that it's a positive, but slightly, I don't know, I guess a refocus in that space.
Yeah, no, I think hotels have realized that they need more control over the destiny, and therefore the direct channel is a channel where they have full control. Now, obviously, Booking.com and Expedia and the other channels are also giving more tools to the hoteliers to really control what's going on. But I think that in terms of being able to message your product appropriately, the health and safety measures, sort of the benefits of staying, what you can do in the destination is something that hotels can truly sort of embrace in this new post-pandemic world. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue for the future.
Okay. And I think that's it. Apart from, I don't know if you just want to say a little something encouraging people to take the survey.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So the one thing that I think is really important is data in these times of so much uncertainty. So we obviously have raw data of bookings and search patterns and so on, and that's certainly something that we can bring to hoteliers worldwide. But I also think that it's very important to share information, and the Pulse Report is really a way to capture that sentiment and those sort of more soft nuances of what's happening and what could happen in the future. So I truly encourage all hoteliers listening to this video to participate in our Pulse Report. It's something that gives you better information and that to decide what to do in your properties, and helps you plan the future in these times of great uncertainty. But they're here, so we have to do something about it, and certainly contributing overall to the industry by sharing your thoughts and your data will help you make better decisions, but will help also the industry in general recover faster.
Okie dokes. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.